All right, hello everybody. Welcome to your very favorite Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. Here comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Mike L, and as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at some Spidey comics from April of 1985.
That's right, and we, as usual, have returning permanent guest host, G.I. Jolie.
Returning semi-permanent. I don't want to fully commit.
Well, after this week's selection of comics, I can see why. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
she's a part of the show until our writers decide that she has schizophrenia and we write her off.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm expecting it soon. We're just here to have fun.
So yeah, this week there's no Deborah Whitman. There is a little bit of Black Cat though, right?
Just the tiniest little sprinkle.
I thought we were done with her, but I guess not. Okay.
Yeah, I thought so too, but here we are.
Yeah.
But this week we also have the first ever issue of Web of Spider-Man, which is kind of replacing Marvel Team Up.
Right, right.
Thank
yeah,
God.
it started in April of 1985, and it ran for 10 years and finished in 1995. And something I actually didn't know about it was it finished because it turned into almost like a spin-off of the Clone Saga. I think it followed Ben Reilly.
Yes.
And then after that, it sucked. They canceled it.
I think what happened was they renamed all the Spider-Man comics like Web. They restarted Web of Spider-Man over at #1 and called it Web of Scarlet Spider. Right. Then it was, I mean, I could be wrong about this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Web of Scarlet Spider and then maybe Amazing Scarlet Spider. I'm not sure. But then I think
it was Spectacular Scarlet. Yeah.
Something like that. But then when they, instead of going back to Web of Spider-Man, I think they went with Sensational Spider-Man by Dan Jurgens, a new #1. And then that only lasted a few, I think Dan Jurgens quit after like less than a year. And anyway, Spider-Man was a complete mess by that point. So
right. And I think that they also started everything. That was when they started like rebooting all of the comics to #1.
Right. Yeah, right around that time, you're right. Because unfortunately, even Amazing Spider-Man got rebooted, then it got rebooted again like 3-4 more times. So that's sort of the whole trend. Also, I want to point out that as we've proven on the show, Marvel Team Up was certainly the black sheep of the family. It was definitely the B team. And then when they started Web of Spider-Man, I'm sure they had good intentions. But judging by this issue, I mean, I love Louise Simonson, but she was the same writer that did the last 2 issues of Marvel Team Up, and Greg LaRocque's the same artist. So it's pretty much this could have been, Spider-Man teamed up with the black costume. It's pretty much an issue of Marvel Team Up. And then the next issue is pretty much the same too. And then we find out, if you read the letters pages this month, that Danny Fingeroth is leaving his editorial duties, and he's becoming the regular writer of Web of Spider-Man, starting with like #4 and #7. And I'm thinking, he's a B. Like, no one had heard of this guy. Why are they giving him a Spider-Man title? Doesn't make any sense to me. So then I know that coming up, he'll only last a little while before he gets replaced. And really, Web of Spider-Man did not find its footing until maybe issue 17, if not much later, around issue 35-ish or 37-ish when Jerry Conway took over. So really, this title was kind of stumbled out of the gate right from the beginning. So. And I also just want to quickly point out that this is the first month that Jim Owsley becomes editor of the Spider-Man line. Although in one letters page, he says he's editing, he only says Spectacular, which is weird. I didn't know if they split up editorial duties at this point. But Jim Owsley at the time was only, I believe, 25. He was also the first ever black editor at Marvel Comics. And he was given the Spider-Man line. This was arguably, this was their second most popular line after X-Men. And in my humble opinion, this is my favorite period of Spider-Man, starting right here up until the death of the Hobgoblin. So, I mean, there are a lot of fill-ins. There's a lot of problems in this era, but he resided over my favorite era with, Peter David writing a lot of the stuff, Mark Beacom doing a lot of the art, Kyle Baker on inks, and I think that this era Spider-Man gets a little bit more adult, which I prefer. But anyway, okay, so we are also changing our reading order. So now we're going to be going Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, then Spectacular Spider-Man. So we have, so unfortunately, who's doing Web this week? I don't remember.
That's me.
That's right. Okay.
Josh gets those amazing honors.
All right. There you go. So take it away, Josh.
So, so I know that you said you didn't really like this issue, Mike.
It's not bad. No, it's not bad.
But it's not bad. It's definitely not the Marvel team-up level of painful to read.
Right.
In my opinion, I think the art was really great. I thought that the stuff with the, what did they call themselves? The Vulturettes or something like that. That was really fun.
But yeah.
It was something Vulturites or something. Yeah. Something. And their dialogue back and forth was super fun. Yeah. I think where it really falls apart is Spider-Man's inner dialogue is so painfully like
sad boy.
Yeah, and it's just like narration for narration's sake. Half of the stuff that he's talking about we don't need to know. Right. We don't need to like. Instead of having a flashback to what happened in the past, we're actually just seeing Spider-Man get dressed and him talking about the symbiote instead of a flashback happening or just moving on with his day and doing something. Like this beginning part of the book really kind of is just him recounting the fact that the symbiote attached itself to him and he got rid of it. But we don't actually see any of that in the flashback. So it's just this boring, dull narration, and they could have gotten away with him saying something like, "Man, I sure do miss the symbiote costume, but I'm glad that it's not attached to me anymore," or something. You know what I mean? Like a simple line to say, "The symbiote is no longer a part of me, and I'm glad that it's being tested on. It's in the proper care." But no, it's like 2 pages until we get the reveal that the symbiote has disguised itself as Peter Parker's costume to trick him into putting it on.
Right.
And when that happens, he starts swinging through the city. And that's when we meet these like vulture goons.
Right.
And I mean, they call them like their like gang name has the word vulture in it. And they have like these vulture type suits, but they never flat out say, "We're working for the Vulture," which is super fun because we didn't have to like stop the action as to what's happening and describe, "Oh yeah, the Vulture," and then have a flashback to the Vulture and how he, went to prison and all that. They just throw you in with these new characters, and their dialogue and their banter back and forth is actually super fun. So they put on their costumes, and their whole thing is they're trying to do some recon on Spider-Man to kind of see where he's at, and then they're supposed to group up and then attack Spider-Man together, I believe it is. But when they do find Spider-Man, or one of the guys finds Spider-Man, he's kind of like jittering on the side of the wall and kind of going, it looks like he's just going crazy, but really he's fighting the symbiote that's attached to him. So that guy decides to take it upon himself to go and attack him alone. And when that does happen, Spider-Man is kind of able to control him and steer him towards this like bell tower. And by that point, a bunch of the other vultures have come and joined to fight him. But Spider-Man is able to make his way to the bell tower and uses the bells to detach the symbiote from him because he knows that it's affected by sound. And when this happens, the vultures leave because the noise is just too painful. And Peter Parker is left costumeless on the ground and is pretty much dying from the sheer sound of being underneath this giant church bell. And the symbiote climbs back up, grabs Peter Parker and pulls him down underneath so he's safe. But doing so, the symbiote sacrificed itself to save Spider-Man, and it dies. It kind of like dissolves and disintegrates from the sound. So I don't know. It's kind of a nice story. again, I think it really suffers when Peter's by himself, because that's when the writers decide that this is where we're going to dump all of the exposition.
Right.
Again, all of the Vulture Gang stuff is super fun. I love their dialogue and banter together. You have like the leader, you have like the wimpy one who doesn't want to rob the old lady. You have you have like the badass. Well, you have the badass who's like doesn't take anybody's shit and is kind of like the rebel of the group. So like all of them together is really nice, because you kind of get that they have their own personalities without having to, again, go in and explain each person's backstory and just like drag the comic. No, they gave that job to Peter Parker this week. But yeah, what did you think, Mike? What's your thoughts?
I definitely, what's funny about this issue, and I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I've read some of these comics so many times, and it's like I read it, then I like it, then the next time I read it, I don't like it, then I sell it, then I buy it again, then I read it, and I like it, and this time I really liked it, and then I was disappointed to go through my collection and find out that I sold it, because the last time I read it, I didn't like it. But no, you're right. Like the dialogue between these guys was really realistic. And I think I didn't appreciate it maybe at one point because I hadn't had all these other issues of Spider-Man to compare it to. But the dialogue is so much more natural. And I also noticed that, we've criticized Greg LaRocque's art in some of these issues. But I noticed when the Vulturians are putting on their costumes, if you notice on digital page 7, it's just when they're putting on their costumes, you can see the body language of like you mentioned kind of like the leader, and then you see the one guy in the background who's kind of like looking up in the sky, like really reveling in his power. And then I like how we have the one guy say, "Gripes, put those away," and then you see that the guy is holding a knife and a gun, right? But again, because this is a 1980s Marvel comic, we're used to having everything spelled out, where you might have like a thought bubble or an explanation. No, you have to look at the art, and you have to look at the dialogue, and you have to, he's talking about the gun in his hand. But I'm so used to everything being spoon-fed that I'm almost like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. This is actually utilizing the art form the way you're supposed to. You're supposed to take in all the information you're given and put the story together in your head. And I can't believe this comic is actually doing it. So yeah, like I agree with you. It's definitely not perfect, but it's a step up for sure above a lot of the stuff we've been reading. So I really did. Yeah, I did like this issue. G.I. Jolie?
I really liked it too. I thought that the adversaries, the Vulturians as adversary were really great. And I agree with Josh. I could not stand Peter. Like usually I can't stand Peter, but this issue was like almost unbearable to read. Like the nonsense that he's thinking about while he's swinging around trying to get the symbiote suit off of him. It's like, Peter, stop. You're like, this is worse than he's ever been, and he's usually a sad sack, but he was like even sadder as he was in even sadder sack in this issue, and it was like it was terrible. At the end of the story, when the symbiote saves him, I wonder, they had also written a line which I felt was kind of sweet. Let me see if I can find it, where it was like, what did it say? Let me get to the end here. He was like, he doesn't know why he's doing this, but in becoming Peter something, like, not only was he trying to become Peter, but he also adopted emotion.
Right.
Yeah. So he was like, so that's why the symbiote goes back and saves Peter, but will he regret it? And I almost felt like, it's like, did Louise Simonson write that to explain why we got all that inner monologue dialogue, like why we got all that inner monologuing between the two of them? Because that's a pretty weak way to explain that for 3 pages you bored us to death with Pete's bullshit.
No, I don't think she was trying to explain it. I think it's just...
I don't think so either. She's a better writer than that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of that inner dialogue happened before he even put on the costume, right?
Right, it did, yeah. For like 2 or 3 pages, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that it was just setting up things for the future. I think mostly with the, I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, with the symbiote coming back and bonding with Eddie and becoming Venom in that relationship, because Eddie already has a relationship with Peter, and then the symbiote also has a relationship with Peter and Spider-Man. So Venom kind of is like, it's almost like Venom is a brother to Spider-Man. In a sense, because they're so like related and connected in that way. Yeah. I mean, Venom gets his powers only because the symbiote is so attached to Peter already and Spider-Man, right? You know, the symbiote models itself after Spider-Man from then on out. So yeah, I think this is kind of almost like the start of that relationship and to almost humanize the symbiote and Venom.
Right. And I got to give props again to Louise Simonson. I think that it's her that thought of this cool ending with the symbiote saving Peter Parker. I've seen this kind of thing before. You know, she's a smart writer. She thinks of things that other people don't think of, and that's why I've always liked her. Although I admit I've wavered. Like I said, I sold this, I bought it, I sold it. I really wish I had it still, but unfortunately I did sell it. I also want to quickly mention, this is now the second time we have seen a cover from Charles Vess. G.I. Jolie, what'd you think of this cover?
I love Charles Vess. I love him. And this is like really good.
Yes.
What does it remind me of? Oh, you know, like all of the children's fantasy that I read, like when I was a kid. It were like just the way that everything is modeled and the way that everything is colored. It's just really reminiscent of that.
Right.
And
he's very much a fantasy painter for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And the logo is super fun. Even though it's very like logo. Yeah, it's pretty superhero-y, but like web of is like a red web, so because he's a spider. Like anyway,
it's like attached to the other like bulkier. Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
Josh, what do you think of the cover?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I really love, like Jolie was saying, that fantasy style. He's very good at doing that. Like I think he's the one who illustrated for Stardust. Correct?
Yeah.
So this definitely reminds me of that, and it has this like really it's very solid. Like you can feel the form of everything. Right. Like it's very 3-dimensional. Like it's not 3D rendered, but you can feel the depth of everything in the cover. I mean, even the background it really feels like it's getting further and further away. I love the texture in the way that it's painted as well. It's fantastic.
Yes, really good. More to come from him. And so yeah, I like the fact that this is a standalone issue. I think it's kind of like it's a well remembered story because it's really the only story with the costume in between him getting rid of it and then Venom coming. So it's really the only symbiote story that we have in this in-between era for another maybe 2 years. But anyway, so I think that's why it's remembered as a classic. But anyway, so I definitely recommend this issue, and I wish I didn't sell it. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, it's definitely a recommend for me. It wouldn't be at the top of my recommendation, and I would mostly be recommending it for the Vulture Gang and the ending with the symbiote. I really love the last like 2-3 pages with almost like no dialogue, no reading. You're just watching this like alien like goop monster save Peter, and it kind of you can 100% read the emotion on this like pile of slime's face.
Yep.
As it's saving like its only friend, essentially.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, and I want to quickly ask you guys, because we all saw the Venom movie. This is a different symbiote than we saw in the movie. Do you prefer Venom or the symbiote to be silent and kind of benign, or to be evil and talking about how he was a loser on his home planet?
I mean, this is definitely more impactful.
Right.
I definitely sympathize with this symbiote more than I would from the movie. Right. I think that the movie, even though it's pretty different from the comics, I did also kind of enjoy the relationship between the symbiote and Eddie Brock in the movie. That was really, I think, the only thing it had going for it, is that like fun dialogue between the two.
Right.
But I think that this definitely works better and is what I prefer.
Right. Yeah, me too. I mean, I can only handle like one guy talking about how big a loser he is, and Peter's doing enough of that for everybody.
Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
So I guess we're gonna move on now to Amazing Spider-Man number 263.
263. Yeah.
Right.
And the way that I dealt with this was that there was a lot, but there's also nothing. So I had to write down my little summary. So bear with me. So this issue is by Tom DeFalco, with Ron Frenz reading and Beatty on art, inking, pencils, etc. So in this issue, it's like a cut back and forth story between two stories. One, the story of Ollie Osnick, and two, the story of Peter Parker. So yeah, I'm going to jump back and forth. I decided that I was going to jump back and forth while I told the stories, because the book did it so effectively. There was no way of telling each story separately.
Right.
And the story making sense because they intertwine. I think they're supposed to mirror each other, but they don't really do that well. So I'm going to cut back and forth. Here we go.
Okay.
So this begins. It begins with Ollie Osnick, who has turned himself into a superhero. So he's created himself a little Spidey suit, like a little red and blue suit with like he's equipped it with like robotic spider legs, and he's calling himself the Spectacular Spider Kid. Now, just in case anyone needs the reminder, we've met Ollie before. Right. In Spectacular number 72, he plays the young sir who idolizes Doc Ock. So yeah, just in case anyone's wondering, why does he have robotic spider arms? Well, it's because this little fan group of supervillains that he was a part of, they dress like their favorite supervillains. So he had created himself this big Doc Ock suit. So he just changed into a Spidey spandex, and then he turned the octopus arms into Spider-Man legs. And he uses that to kind of propel himself throughout the city. So anyway, he's out for a rip on his new robotic spider arms, and he stumbles on a gang called the Blazing Skulls, who are in the middle of mugging an older couple in a dark alley. So Ollie, because he's a super kid, he's Spider Kid now, he swings down there to stop the robbery in progress, but his robotic spider legs like trip up because he's a kid, and they cause him to clumsily sort of plummet to the ground. So the two skulls are like perturbed. There's like two blazing skulls down there, and they're kind of like perturbed that their robbery in progress is being interrupted. So they descend on on Ollie, but like in the background, the police are coming, and then they get chased away. But on their way out, they threaten this kid. If they should cross paths again, he's toast. So anyway, cut to Spider-Man, who, and like we mentioned earlier, this is where we get some Black Cat, this little small sprinkle. Spidey is swinging around the city with a Black Cat, and it's not clear what time of day it is, but it looks as though they're sort of wrapping up what must have been like a long night at work. because Black Cat's like inviting him to go home for snuggles. But unfortunately for Peter, the mood goes super sour once they start to talk about Kingpin and her new powers. So in this instance, like they're not broken up, and this must have been right after she, you know, gets the courage to tell Peter where her powers have come from.
Right.
So Peter makes a snide comment about her keeping the powers that she got from Kingpin a secret for so long, and surprise, because you're an a-hole, she takes it to heart. Especially since he continues to fumble and says, oh, who knows how long you've been keeping secrets from me? Like, what else are you keeping from me? And
God.
yeah, right? So she refuses to be... Here's the thing, though. She refuses to be judged by Peter, so it's like, bye, Felicia, and she heads home alone.
Yep.
Yeah, literally, bye. She pieces out, which is crazy because this is not our... What? Who is this woman? She leaves Peter to scold himself for being so petty. Side note, on the last episode of Spider-Cast, they had broken up at the end of Spectacular, right? So to be reading...
Yeah, that's what was so confusing.
Right.
To be reading this was like a little bit jarring.
Right.
I mean, I'm not used to her being so in charge of her emotions.
Right.
At least not in the last 6 to 8 months. So this was like really empowering to read. Just that little scene where she's like, oh, I butched up, got the courage to tell you what I've been afraid to tell you about. And then you tell me you don't know if I'm going to keep lying to you. 1, fair. 2, I'm going home. Like, I'm not taking that. When has she ever done that before? Never.
It almost feels like a retcon.
Well, it's a different writer,
because
right?
It's, well, the thing is, though, it's almost like a different ending of them breaking up.
Right.
Because Peter finally reveals that that he knows about the powers, and then they break up, right? Am I remembering that correctly? Like, the second he says, I know that Kingpin gave you the powers, they break up. So why now are they together again and talking about her having powers and keeping it away from him?
You're right. It probably
just
is a retcon. Yeah, it's probably like, well, I didn't like the way Al Milgrom wrote that, so I'm just going to rewrite it.
Yeah, it really feels... It was jarring because we had followed the one story for so long, and then finally got an ending to that, like, piece of crap, and then it's like retconned in a few panels, and it's like, oh, this is kind of nice, actually. Right. This is what should have happened the entire time.
Right? This is exactly what should have happened. Yeah. And that's it. I would have been happy if that was the last interaction that we saw.
Yeah. Between
him and the Black Cat. But instead, we were treated to garbage, and then we got this. So, yeah. It is a little bit strange. But here's the thing. In true Peter fashion, it's like every single person who writes Peter Parker understands Peter Parker for sure. Because here's the thing. He doesn't care. He cares very little about what happened. So he doesn't spend a lot of time dwelling. After all, he's literally a mess. And he hasn't eaten like all day. And come to think of it, there's a lot of instances where he goes home and eats or remembers to eat, and he says it. And I was thinking maybe that's why he treats like Aunt May and his friends and, you know, every single lover he's ever had so poorly. He's like hangry and running on fumes every time you see him. I don't know. That's what I'm going to equate it to. He's hungry. Peter needs to eat more. Because I know how I get when I'm hungry. I get angry.
It's very relatable.
Yeah. So maybe that's all it is. Maybe he just needs a sandwich. Or like a saltine. I don't know. Just like eat before you go out.
A single cracker.
Some saltines, fine. Okay, so what he does, which is like what most ladies do, he soaks his costume in the sink, and literally like takes a bag of cookies and a carton of milk to bed, and like that's the end of that scene. So weird. It's just it's super strange, and like this issue just continues on like with this level of like slice of life strangeness. So it cuts back to Ollie, it must be like the next day because he's at school. And like most of our high school experiences, I'm sure, it includes a lot of bullying and fat shaming. So,
Yep,
the scene isn't really terribly important to the main plot and is more of a vehicle to introduce two new characters. So we get Brad Rossi, who is our bully and resident piece of S, and Jane, who sticks up for Ollie and who we find out is Brad Rossi's quote girl, because he literally says it and she doesn't acknowledge it. He's just like, how's my girl? And she's like, you're a piece of shit.
Well, I think she kind of does, right? Because she says word over kind of thing, like,
oh, not yet.
oh, right, sorry.
It apparently takes more bullying for her to be over with somebody.
Right.
So again, it cuts again back to Peter, and Peter has woken up. It's the next day. He's visiting Harry in the hospital because the girls, at least Liz, is in the hospital after the episodes, after what happened to them with the Hobgoblin. They were in that burning building, Harry, Liz, and Mary Jane. And now, obviously, Liz is still in there because she's also pregnant. So, there's a scene where Peter visits Harry in the hospital, and he finds out that the fate of the baby is like really precarious, and he's sitting with Harry in the waiting room waiting to hear more news, and he is just listening to Harry, and Harry is blaming himself for not being able to save Liz, and Peter quietly takes a moment to empathize to himself, and remembers how much he loved Gwen Stacy, which was kind of nice because, I kind of forgot about that. And it's been a while since he sat with his friends and just had feelings that weren't like, hey, can you check up on Flash? Shan. Anyway. Yeah. So, but here's the thing. He also uses it. It's also sort of used as a moment to remind the reader again that he doesn't love Felicia. It was written really weird. So it's like, I've loved her. Oh, Harry's pain reminds me of Gwen Stacy, who I love more than anything, even more than Felicia. Like, really? You gotta bring her into this? Okay. We know you love Mrs. Muggins more than you love Felicia. So, like, don't tell us who you love. We know who you love. Anyway, it cuts back to the schoolyard, which is super jarring because we're in this really emotional state, and it goes back to Ollie, where the bullying and the name calling from Brad and his like posse of like high school toughs, it's escalated.
Right.
And Jane is so put off, and this is where she breaks up with him, like on the spot, right in front of all of his friends, no less. So she's like, that's it, we're through. I told you I don't like somebody who picks on people. And you embarrassed him in front of the whole school. We're done. I would have given up on this idiot too. He deserves it. Cut back to the hospital where Mary Jane shows up and takes over Harry watch duty. So that frees up Peter Parker. And Peter sort of, he's still looking for the Hobgoblin. And now that he sees that Harry is in so much pain, he feels bad that Harry blames himself. He's like, no, I gotta find the Hobgoblin. He's gotta pay for what he's done. Like, he's hurting people. Now he's hurting my friends. And my friends are blaming themselves for not being able to keep themselves safe, when in fact the Hobgoblin is super evil. Anyway, but here's the thing. He goes to change and remembers that his costume is soaking in the sink at home.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Love
this
it.
is like, this is crazy because this is like, oh, anyway. But he goes home and he's just like, what do I do? But he remembers that Black Cat, the sweetheart that she is, hand sewed him a black suit. So he puts that thing on. Admits that it kind of gives him like PTSD to put it on, but puts it on anyway. And and he goes out and he's like, okay, I'll go out in this suit, which is like, it's really odd that he would do that, but whatever. So while he's out web slinging, he sees in the sky a modified spider beacon. He knows it's not his.
Yeah.
I love this. I love this moment.
Me too.
Right? And he goes to it anyway. And he finds on a nearby rooftop, Ollie/Spider Kid has set up the fake beacon to like meet him in order to give him his proposal, a proposition that he be his sidekick. But because Peter hates everybody but himself, he spider-splains how hard it is to be a superhero and that no one should want this kind of a life, and he rejects the poor kid. This kid has robot spider legs. Like, he engineered robot spider legs. Come on. Like, he doesn't see the similarities between the two of them. But oh well. It's a hard life and you don't want it. And Ollie is so right? Ollie is so rebuffed and hurt, and he retreats. He thought that Peter would be able to relate to a kid like him, but he was totally wrong. And he's really sad, and I am sad. I'm really sad now. Like, everybody hates rejection, but like, you know, never meet your heroes, I guess. This is one of those times. And weirdly, Jane is looking for him.
Right.
She's walking the streets of New York. Brooklyn? Is that where Spider-Man lives, in Brooklyn?
Queens.
Okay. Jane from school catches up to him, and she recognizes him from his silhouette.
Yeah,
she's
that
like,
was funny.
I recognize that shape anywhere.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is a shape. He is shapes, but rude.
Well, I guess maybe she knows that he was like, he has the Doc Ock arms.
Yeah.
So it could be that she like recognized the suit, but
maybe.
But it was strange. It was very strange.
Well, when you look like a Rubens, you're hard to mistake in the sky, right? And she goes, she catches up with him and actually like is able to get his attention. And he stops because, oh boy, attention from a woman. And they duck into an alley to have a chat. Let's see. Where am I? Blah, 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 blah. In my notes. Oh, yes. So Jane from school catches up with him. They duck into an alley, blah, 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 blah. But wouldn't you know that an alley is exactly where the Blazing Skulls gang is hanging out? And they rush. They see him. And they're like, ooh, revenge is ours. We're going to get this guy. Because he foiled our mugging earlier. But here's the thing. Peter grows a soul. And let's see. Peter, who seems to only emit the first crappy thought to cross his mind, is feeling guilty, surprise, for the way that he treated Ollie, and has doubled back and helps to help Ollie and Jane. So he helps Ollie and Jane. There's a page of fighting. They web them up. The kids get saved. The most important thing to take away from this is that Ollie and Jane leave arm in arm, and Ollie's like, I'm never doing this again. But I'm doing it for a girl. I'm going to give this up for you, babe. And then they walk into the sunset. Which is a weird way to give up your dreams, but a lot of people marry down, so whatever.
Right.
Peter returns to the hospital where he discovers that Liz has had the baby. And it's a boy because in the 80s, we're still gendering based on whatever genitalia comes attached. The glow and emotions that fill the hospital room cause Peter to have faith in hope again. And the next day, he visits Ollie in full Spidey at school. Mm-hmm. And he threatens Brad Rossi, and his goons with fists, should they ever lay hands on his pal. And that's how the book ends. And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thoughts, gents?
Well, I give it, okay, like, I admire DeFalco and Frenz for being disciples of, like, Lee and Ditko, like, telling a very dense story in only, 23 pages? 22 pages is pretty admirable. There's lots of tiny boxes. There's lots of dialogue. Like, there's lots of story here. It's just... And I do like the spirit of it. Like, I like the idea of the Spectacular Spider Kid, and also the Spider-Man Revenge Squad, which is this is all kind of satirizing Superman. I love that all these ideas. It's just that it's not. I don't think it's a great story, and I think it's funny, but not terribly funny. So it's more like I admire the idea of it more than I actually enjoy reading it.
Yeah. So did you enjoy reading it, Josh, and how much pain are you in?
Okay, so actually, I have a weird nostalgia with this book. I remember this book when I was a kid. I think this is like one of the only books that I read from like 85-ish, like from this era as a kid. And the only thing that I took away from this book as a kid was, oh my God, there's a kid and he's also dressed up as Spider-Man. I could do that.
Right.
And I remember drawing my own, like me as a Spider-Man with arms like this, with spider arms. And it's because of this issue. And I know I have a drawing of this somewhere from when I was a kid. And I'm going to have to fish this out and find it so I can show you guys. But so I had a weird nostalgia reading it. That being said, no, this was not great. This wasn't great. It's so weird. Peter is written so poorly in this comic. It feels almost as if this story was written in between Peter having the symbiote suit and not having the suit. Because the way he's acting at the beginning feels like Peter with the suit, and the way he's acting at the end feels like after he gets rid of the suit. And I wonder if it's like a weird story where it was meant to happen during that time where he gets rid of the suit, but it was like pushed aside for a different story, because even Peter putting on the black costume seems really weird and out of place. Like the only reason he puts that suit on is so that later on Spider Kid can say, "Oh, you're not wearing the same costume as me. Now I've got to change." Like, it's for a weird bit. I just didn't get it. It felt weird that he put on that costume. Like, I get the setup too. Like, the setup is him with the suit in the sink as he's washing it and it's still wet, so he's got to put the suit on. But like, why? What's the buildup for that? What's the reason?
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense, and that's why to me it came off as this was supposed to be when he gets rid of the symbiote. Like, it just feels like that's what the story was supposed to be.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because I thought the same thing. One, he's like, "Oh, we don't match." Oh,
right.
no. But then what?
I was gonna say, or maybe this is also could be like during the same time as Web. So maybe it could have taken place like in the middle of Web, where he has the actual symbiote on. Okay, and then later on, they kind of decided, no, we're not going to do that. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, you know what? I have a continuity note because I just looked it up. Apparently, when Peter and Black Cat are swinging in the city and they're talking about the power, Black Cat's powers, that takes place before Spectacular 100. So technically, they just had their battle with the Kingpin, and this is where Spider-Man learns about her powers. So technically, this is not after Peter Parker 100, it's before it. So that explains that part of it, but maybe you're right. Maybe it was meant to be the costume, the symbiote. Yeah. I don't know. Possibly.
Yeah, it's weird. It seems like maybe the premise was made before everything was finalized in the script, and like it really feels like the writers weren't talking to each other as to what is happening each month in their respective issues, because also, it's all out of place.
The fact that we're transitioning from one editor to another could explain that, right? Right. Like from Danny Fingeroth to Jim Mosley, maybe things got lost in the shuffle. Like, and also Al Milgrom apparently at this point was off Spectacular temporarily because he was writing Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. So maybe he wasn't even in town, who knows? And of course he never actually came back. So maybe they couldn't contact, who knows? But yeah, you're right. There could have been some behind the scenes stuff going on there for sure.
Yeah, I just figured that like maybe we read them like in a weird order, or like the release schedule is just a little bit strange. But who knows? I mean, going back to this whole, why did he put on that black suit on original page 15? My guess is that the 5th panel, it's like it knew Becca in the future was going to review this, because that is a spectacular ass.
Wait. Digital? Did you say digital 15?
Original 15.
Original 15.
Oh.
Yeah. If this was the actual symbiote costume, it would be far up there.
Oh, yeah.
This Black Cat knew what she was doing when she made this suit.
It hugs every curve. And I mean, Peter is totally right. What did he say? He said, she could easily become the Sergio Valente of the superhero set. Yeah, that is a high compliment. Even though Sergio Valente, his specialty was stretch denim, maybe they could do the next Spidey.
Oh my God! Do you think that this suit is all around jeans? Is this everywhere jeans?
I hope so.
Oh, I miss Becca.
I mean, I miss her too. I'm honestly gonna send her this picture of Spidey's butt right now. But anyway, that's the takeaway, I think.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to take away. I really did like Ollie. Again, that might be a nostalgia factor for me. I like the idea of a kid idolizing Spider-Man and wanting to adapt and become that that figure that he loves so much. I know that when I created my version of this, the problem that I ran into was what buildings am I going to swing across in Windsor? Right? So I'm like, well, I've got to have the arms too then. So I can still like jump around as a spider, but I've got these giant arms. So I don't know. I think it's kind of clever, this whole idea with this kid, but I don't think it pans out in the end.
Right.
Like
it's better. It works better. Well, for lack of a better term, it works better on paper.
Yeah.
It sounds like a good idea, but the issue's not great. Mm-hmm. But I do have to give it props again, because every time I read one of these Bronze Age comics and then I go and read a freaking modern comic, I am reminded how dense these comics are and how long they took to read. So even if you want to complain about the content, you can't criticize the form, right? Like,
right.
It's just so satisfying to read a comic and have it have a complete, like they introduce new characters, and then by the end of the story, their story is done, and you never see them again. It's great. I don't know. I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd like to see more Blazing Skulls, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, like, really, if you want to break it down, you have the continuing subplots. You have a page with Black Cat. You have a page with Harry Osborn in the hospital, a page or two. You know, so if you're watching a TV show, that's your little subplots that you touch on. But then the main story is done in one. And really, that's the way you do it, right? So that when new readers come in, they get their full story. They're done in one. And then they also get their subplots that make them want to come back for more. And I don't understand why Marvel and DC can't enforce that now. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, the movies know how to do it, but...
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway...
Every television show on Earth knows how to do it.
Exactly. It's just Marvel and DC don't want to do it. But anyway, so I recommend this one mildly. I think it's fun, but it's not great. Mm-hmm. Josh, what about you?
I don't think I would recommend it, but I also don't not recommend it. Like it's pretty like passable to me. It's not something I would go out of my way to hand to somebody, but I also wouldn't discourage anybody from reading it. It's pretty like middle I don't know.
Tier?
Middle tier, mid tier. It's fine. It's got some fun parts to it, but I think as a whole it doesn't really work as a great story. So
right.
No.
I know it's hard to say I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I would recommend it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The listeners, I think, understand what I'm trying to say.
What about you, Jolie? I gotcha.
Okay.
I recommend it for sure for the art. The art is really good.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone needs to know Ollie. Ollie Osnick is like the next person we create a campaign for, because like, you know, Little Round Jolie also was bullied, but I had no interest in robotics, so instead I took the bullying, which sucked. And also I didn't really know who Spider-Man was, because, you know, they gendered reading, so, you know, it was weird for me to like Spider-Man. Right. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't admit it. But I didn't really know who he was. Mm-hmm. I know now.
Yeah.
And everybody, so I just got to cut this off. Everybody that I recommend this to, if you ever had someone call you fat, if you ever felt fat, if you ever ate fat, read this book and you will know Ollie Osnick and love him.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So now we are going to move on to Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man 101. The only thing I can say, the first thing I want to say about this comic, it has a very iconic cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's oft reprinted. It's oft talked about. It's funny because it's drawn by John Byrne, who I'm not a huge fan of, but this is a solid cover, and it's funny because this is 1985, but it looks like 1990 Sin City, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
oh yeah,
it, like black and white, but you know the white, like his feet, the soles of his feet are white, so you can see where they are. Spider-Man's all in black. He's in his black costume. The cityscape is all black and white, so it's a great cover. The only unfortunate thing about it is it has nothing to do with the content. You open it up, he's in a different costume.
Right.
You know, there's a great cover, but they should have used it on a different story, right?
They should have used this on Web.
Yep.
Yeah, Web has a great cover, but yeah, you're right.
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe that's why they didn't use it on web, because they're like, Vess already did a bang up job.
Right.
I mean, even in Amazing, this would have been good. He wears the black costume in Amazing. Yep. I love this cover. I want this as a poster.
Right.
It's so fun.
It's just, and I mean, again, like I'm very critical of John Byrne, especially his later career, but this is great. It's just perfect simplicity, great design. Like, you know, you can see the like his one, what is that? His right arm or the left arm? Anyway, you can see like the separation of the two buildings.
Right.
Like, his arm goes between them, so that's cool. And then the fact that the soles of his feet are white, even though they wouldn't be, but who cares? Like, you can see where those are. It's just perfect, you know? This is like the sweet spot in his career before he kind of started to go down. So yeah, this is great stuff. Then you open up the comic and it's a different story. Okay, so written by Cary Burkett, who's written some issues of Marvel Team Up that we were very critical of. This issue is inked by Jack Abel, who's a classic Marvel inker, and it's drawn by Juan Alacantara, who I have never heard of. And we could talk more about that later. The art is not terrible, but it certainly doesn't look like standard art of the day. So I'm not sure what this guy's story is, if he was up and coming, or maybe he was just someone who wasn't really involved in comics, but it doesn't look like a typical Marvel comic of the day, right?
Right.
I definitely have fond memories of this comic because I've had it since I was a kid. We've got an opening little scene here where Peter Parker sneaks into is it a baseball game?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no?
It's a
concert.
It's a bluegrass concert.
Right.
Oh, right.
But I like the fact that he goes through the trouble of actually paying for a ticket, right? But he sneaks in and then watches the concert by creating a spider hammock, like a web hammock from like the lights at the top of the stadium. I think that's really cool. And like this scene here where he kind of like he accidentally catches two people making out like below him and like, you know, behind like this stadium wall here is really fun. This opening scene is classic Peter Parker. I love it. It's classic Spidey. Then we get kind of a weird scene where suddenly he has these, first of all, psychedelic flashbacks, but that's beside the point. But he suddenly has a flashback of remembering Gwen Stacy, which is kind of shoved in there, but no, that's fine. Then he helps someone, you know, change a flat tire on their van, but then he looks over and he sees whatever this is, the Brooklyn Bridge. Oh, and then that brings back more memories of Gwen. And again, it's like, okay, I get it. This is what the issue is going to be about, but it is kind of weird that like all of a sudden in the middle of the ongoing Spidey saga, he just has memories of Gwen. And it clearly shows that this was probably a fill-in they just had in the drawer, and they thought, okay, well, we got to fill in an issue. We'll shove it in here and just get out of the way. So then Spidey goes about his day, and then we cut over to Killer Shrike. Again, this leads me to believe that this could have been a Marvel team-up, right? This could have been Spider-Man and Killer Shrike. Is it Killer Shrike? Yeah, it's Killer Shrike, right? Is that his name?
Oh, it's our favorite Dom, isn't it? Blacklash?
Oh, it's Blacklash. Where did I get Killer Shrike from? But anyway. So yeah, Blacklash decides he's going to...
I kept wanting to say Whiplash.
Yeah, because he did change his name. But this
does he become Whiplash?
Yeah, he changed his name.
Okay, because he's the same ponytail and everything.
Right. So he decides to attack this... what is it? Is it like a casino?
Something. To be honest, this is the issue this week that's just a blur.
It's research a blur. Complex? Yeah. It's no. I mean, granted, I was watching an episode of Happy. I might be mixing the two up because he was in a racetrack. But anyway, so the point is Spider-Man finds out what's going on. He sneaks in, has a fist fight. The guy kidnaps this girl. Blacklash kidnaps this girl. Spider-Man comes in. They have a big fight. And then meanwhile, there's a subplot with the girl's boyfriend, right? Who wants to kind of like get in there and like save the day.
Yeah.
Oh, it seems to go on forever. And then I don't even remember how it gets resolved. Spider-Man punches him.
He has to. Yeah, he like webs him up so he doesn't go and interfere with the kidnapping, with the hostage situation.
But yeah, and like there's a little subplot about the boyfriend learning his lesson or whatever, and then like Spider-Man has a flashback of Gwen, and then Spider-Man saves the day, and then he goes home and he's watching on the news, and at the very end we get this scene of him going to Gwen Stacy's tombstone, leaving flowers, and then like going away, and it's just, oh man, okay, it's a fill-in. I can forgive a lot, but it's just really forced. This whole Gwen Stacy thing is really melodramatic, and just it's really aggravating how it's just shoved in there. And we get to the end, and like the flower on the tombstone is supposed to kind of like really leave a lump in our throat, but it just comes across as really forced. I don't know. This is the kind of Spider-Man villain I don't like, so I can't recommend this issue. Josh, you sound like you want to say something.
How does this even relate to Gwen Stacy?
It doesn't.
Because he's saving a blonde woman?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. They always it's always like you could take any Spider-Man story and be like, I don't want to get involved, but wait a minute, let me flash back to Uncle Ben. And you could do every Spider-Man comic with a flashback to either Uncle Ben or Gwen Stacy, right? But the fact that they hit you over the head with it is so just embarrassing. It's not good. And I bet you that Cary Burkett walked away thinking, oh, another good one in the can. I did it again. But it's crap.
I think it would have been more powerful if we didn't have all of these weird flashbacks to Gwen, or these like weird, like you were saying, psychedelic trips where Gwen is just like there with Spider-Man.
Right.
If he would have just at the end said something like, I'm glad that I was able to save someone, and that this couple was able to live and be together at the end, and that he goes and visits the grave silently, that is stronger. But we get it. We get Peter is sad about Gwen's death. Right. So him going to see her at the end of the issue doesn't have any impact, because we see her this entire book. We know that he's already sad. Like there's nothing here that actually adds to the story. I think that the panels themselves are powerful and good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't add anything to the story. No, it is the problem. I love that there's no dialogue. There's no word. It's nothing. It just says epilogue a few days later, and we see Peter in costume swing to the graveyard and leave a flower at a tombstone, and then the last panel is the front of the tombstone, and we see Gwendolyn Stacy and the rose in front of the in front of the grave. It's really nice, and it's a very good ending. It's just not the ending to this story.
Right. Good. Exactly.
So,
G.I. Julie, what do you think?
I thought it was gonna be really fun. We were treated to like a really excellent cover, and then it said Echoes, and then tonight only Bluegrass Music Festival featuring Dale Reinhold and the Chicken Pickers, and then I was like, oh, what's going down at the Bluegrass Festival? Like, what kind of crime could be happening here? Oh, the crime of bluegrass. But even it all went downhill immediately after this, because even Spider-Man is like, this is not my kind of thing. I don't usually do this. Okay, so why are you here?
Right.
And it's this. The smell, the sounds, it evokes the seeing of the couples together. It evokes all the emotion in him and reminds him of Gwen Stacy. So had he not gone to a concert that he'd never ever go to begin with, what you're telling me we would have never had this issue, literally and figuratively,
right?
We would have never, like, the first memory of him is weird. Sorry, the first memory of her is weird.
Right.
The one in her in the pinup style suit.
Yeah.
That's like as tall as a skyscraper. That one?
Exactly. Yeah. That one. The one where they draw her to look like a porn star, where they clearly drew her naked. And then was like, oh, wait, she's naked.
Just like a black Sharpie and covered it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll put her in a black bathing suit. Inappropriate. Like, just... what? I don't understand how the woman you love comes to you in a vision and she's in swimwear. Bent over and in swimwear.
Good point.
Like, it's a really weird thought to be having. Did bluegrass really make him... seeing those couples and all that bluegrass music, did it give him other thoughts? Like, maybe he regrets... Maybe the echoes that we're talking about are the echoes of his regret for breaking up with Felicity. Felicia.
And you know what's a good point is that never in any comic did Gwen dress like this. Like, she was, give her like a nice 60s mini skirt or something. But yeah, what the hell? She's just naked with like blue stuff covering her torso. It's ridiculous.
Look at how big her jugs are.
Yes.
They're gigantic.
Yes, you're right.
It doesn't make... None of this makes sense. But here's the thing. This artist is pretty good.
He is good. Like,
yeah.
Okay, you know what's funny? I just looked him up. This is the only Marvel comic he's ever done, and his only other comic book credit is like an indie thing. So he's probably not a comic artist. He's probably like, an illustrator or whatever he is, but he clearly is a skilled artist. He knows, I think the only weird thing, if you really look at his pages, if you flip through them, you'll notice most of his shots are all medium. The size of the characters don't change in the panel. So he might have changed that up a little bit, like done a close-up, then a wide shot, then a whatever shot. But his actual skill, there's nothing wrong with his skill. So the artwork is actually fine.
Yeah. Like, the women are very, very, like, buxom, the way that he draws them.
Right.
And maybe that's, like, maybe he's... I was like, is Peter misremembering the love of his life? Is that why he's confused? Like, he's this other woman that he's helping to rescue. Is that why she's also reminding him of Gwen Stacy? Because both of their racks are gigantic. They're all kinds of blonde.
Wouldn't that be funny if we just saw a blonde with huge tits? He's like, Gwen, I have memories of when I killed Gwen.
They didn't even draw in her face. Like, that's all that Peter remembers. Like, I mean, they might as well have done that. There's no reason for her to be here. Like, they could have erased this and just been like, dang, it sure would be nice to see some boobies right now. Like, what? It just doesn't make any sense. Oh my God, it's awful. And I was really looking forward to this issue when I was reading the first page. I thought it was a really fun idea. It's clever.
Yeah.
He slipped some money to the guy at the box office. So he can, he pays for a ticket, essentially. He webs himself a hammock and he's relaxing, about to watch a concert. It's super fun. And then what? And then what? Did Gwen listen to bluegrass?
I don't know.
No connection.
Like, you couldn't have written something like, oh, she really liked jazz music or whatever. It reminds. Oh, I didn't realize that, this swanky band was going to be playing this song that reminds me of her. It's nothing.
Right.
It could have been her favorite band.
Yeah.
No, he just sees this couple making out and he's like, oh boy. Yeah. This one is really disappointing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because it,
and not only
is it
disappointing. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, again, I think it's kind of like it's really a cool idea on paper, right? Like he saves this couple or this woman and her boyfriend is unable to help in this situation. And he's able to actually stop the villain this time and unite this couple again. And that can relate to Gwen. But the entire time leading up to this moment, it doesn't make sense why he's thinking about her or why she has been showing up in like these weird hallucination type, things.
Right.
If at the end they just make reference to it again with him visiting her at the gravesite, then that would be a stronger ending. And I don't think this issue would be as weak.
Right.
No. And like that fight between him and Blacklash lasted like 12 billion pages.
Yeah.
Right.
It shouldn't.
Right.
Like the only panel that mattered was the one where Blacklash is like, "Whoa, well, like every good Dom, I carry an extra whip." Like,
yeah, what?
that was the best. That was the best part of the 12 billion pages that I read, because we know that he foils Blacklash. Part of it is just like him. Do you know what? 3 whole pages are just Blacklash swinging his whip towards Spidey, and it's like, okay, is anyone gonna walk towards each other?
Right. You're totally right. I'm looking at that right now. You're right.
Terrible.
Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels, 7 panels of that.
Yeah.
I mean, so the entire time they're talking about Gwen, or Peter is imagining Gwen, and there's this blonde woman that is supposed to, I guess, kind of look like her. And there's a villain with a rope. Now, don't you think that they would maybe play homage to her death and have him like have her tied to the end of the whip and like dangling off of a building or something to actually have it tie into that story?
Right.
The only thing that's tied in is the fact that she's a blonde woman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and that one part where she's like, "Oh God, she looks so scared. The look in her eyes is exactly the look that Gwen had in her eyes." It's like, this is
Fear?
You're reaching, Peter. Peter, are you okay? Peter?
Yeah, it's very strange. And again, I thought that they were going to build up to a moment where like he has to save her from falling again. But no, they
nothing.
No, he just punches him.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is there's more fill-ins to come.
Oh,
Good.
And
yikes.
the next issue of Peter Parker is also written by Cary Burkett. So we have more to look forward to next week.
Oh.
But anyway, so yeah, this was a strange week. We got a new Spider-Man title, so that's good. Unfortunately, in the same week that we get a new Spider-Man title, we already have fill-ins for other books, meaning that they, at this point, don't have enough good Spidey stories to fill out 3 titles. So I don't know why they need 3 of them, but that's neither here nor there. I don't recommend this issue. I don't think anyone should reread it. Read it. I don't want to reread it, but I probably will read it. Josh, do you recommend this issue?
No, I don't.
G.I. Jolie.
Oh no, not even to like replace like toilet paper.
Okay. I recommend the art. The art's cool. Considering this is the only comic this guy ever drew, it's kind of cool to see his art.
Yeah.
The cover's fantastic. I recommend you Google it.
Yeah, it is. Well, and everyone, this is, like I said, oft reprinted, oft talked about. Everyone loves this cover. It's kind of universal. So anyway, so Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, well, we want to thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcast or dropping us a line on Twitter at HCT Spidercast. We really want to hear what you guys think about the episodes and the issues that we're reading and talking about. So please contact us and keep in touch. We want to keep that conversation going.
That's right, and join us next week for a special look at X-Men crossovers featuring Spider-Man and a very special guest in the form of Harvey Brent from Full Volume.
Right, so, and that's X-Men number 190 and X-Men number 191.
Right, that's
just
right.
in
if
case
you want to read along with us. Yeah. So until next Monday, Spider Friends, go for it!